Good morning. Welcome to Beverly Unitarian Church online worship. My name is Jennie Cottrill and I am a member of this church, and I am glad to welcome you to worship today. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation of people of many ages, races, religions, and secular identities, genders, sexual orientations, abilities, educations, life experiences, and traditions. Here we celebrate a diversity of beliefs, striving always to make space for more. All of you are sacred, and all of you is sacred. You are welcome here. Whatever your past or present is like, we invite you to walk into the future with us. Like other Unitarian Universalist congregations, we affirm 7 principles, which are not doctrine or dogma, but rather our shared values and moral guide. To learn more about these principles, please visit the website of our denomination, www.uua.org. Our minister is the Reverend David Schwartz. Frequently, members of our congregation lead the service, and it is my honor to do so today. We especially welcome visitors and hope you'll stay for the virtual coffee hour after the service on Zoom using the link that will be shared at the end of the service. We look forward to the day when we will be able to meet you in person. Although we currently remain distanced physically, we can stay connected. To get more involved, check out our Facebook page and our website. Contact the office to sign up for our monthly newsletter and weekly Friday email blast, and to be connected to Reverend David for pastoral care. And now, let us join together in spirit and prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
My hands are strong enough, they're strong enough, and I'm good enough. My hands are strong enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough, they're long enough, and I'm good enough. My arms are long enough to give love. I know that my heart is wide enough, it's wide enough, I'm good enough. My heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my light is bright enough, it's bright enough, I'm good enough. My light is bright enough to give love. And my heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough to give love. My hands are strong enough to give love.
The idea for this service first occurred to me during the winter of 2013-2014. It was the coldest winter in recorded Chicago history. 82 inches of snow fell, and a new word entered the common lexicon: polar vortex. That winter, the weather was so bad that even in the summer afterward, to speak of it brought on shudders and winces, as if we were all still raw from the trauma of it. The first time I preached this sermon was in February 2015 at Beverly Unitarian Church during Chicago's 5th largest blizzard in history. And if you were one of the 15 or so intrepid souls who made it to church during that event, you may remember the essence of my message, that Groundhog Day, far from being simply the trivial observance of a superstition around a minor woodland mammal, is actually a modern vestige of an ancient pagan holiday, Imbolc, which deeply honors the human capacity for endurance and hope. If you attend an online church 2 weeks ago, coinciding with another large jump of snow upon Chicagoland, when we were all blessedly able to attend church without shoveling out first, one of the pandemic's silver linings, you will also remember our ministerial intern Julia's exploration of the holiday of Imbolc, Christianized as Candlemas or the Feast of St. Bridget, and how it is particularly apt to this February during this winter of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I am not afraid of being repetitive here. If the Bill Murray movie Groundhog Day teaches us anything, it is that sometimes you need to repeat a lesson over and over again before it sinks in. And many have likened the days of the pandemic era to the movie Groundhog Day. In fact, in 2020, we coined the term Blur's Day to refer to the phenomenon of each day of working or learning from home blurring into the next, with no social engagements to break up the monotony. And in this perpetual Blur's Day, haven't we faced the same struggles over and over again and had to learn to cope with these struggles anew each time? So maybe some repetition would be a good idea for us all. And while I assure you that Groundhog Day is not a trivial holiday, there is something about a diminutive, weather predicting furry animal that cannot help but induce a smile in us. Perhaps a little levity is just what the doctor ordered to help us get through the long winter, be it physical or metaphorical. I light this chalice that is the symbol of our faith. And with the lighting of this chalice, I read these words from our hymnal. These words speak of a house, and we are not gathered together in our house of worship. But I am in my house, speaking to you in yours, and we are together in the metaphoric house of the love that we share as a community of faith. So in that spirit, this reading is called This House. This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature. It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle. It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person. It offers a platform for the free voice for declaring, both in times of security and danger, the full and undivided conflict of opinion. It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics abide in a community of searchers. It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks. It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present in visions of growth and progress. This house is a cradle for our dreams, the workshop of our common endeavor.
Friends, will you join me in the words of our covenant? Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll give you love when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll give you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Hi, you may have noticed that I'm wearing a groundhog on my shirt. And this service, I am talking about the holiday called Groundhog Day, which happened less than 2 weeks ago. And on that holiday, by superstition, if the groundhog sees his shadow, we'll have 6 more weeks of winter. Well, that is just a superstition, which means that it's not really true. But the actual weather forecast seems to suggest that we are indeed going to have at least 6 more weeks of winter. It's pretty cold out there and very snowy, and by now all of us are getting pretty sick of it. I am not going to read a story about a groundhog today, though. I am going to read a story about 2 other animals who are 2 of my favorite animal book characters of all time, Frog and Toad. And this story that I'm going to read about them is about how they, just like we, and just like the groundhog, are very, very eager for spring to come. The story is called The Corner. Frog and Toad were caught in the rain. They ran to Frog's house. "I am all wet," said Toad. "The day is spoiled." "Have some tea and cake," said Frog. "The rain will stop. If you stand near the stove, your clothes will soon be dry." "I will tell you a story while we are waiting," said Frog. "Oh, good," said Toad. And here are Frog and Toad having a pot of tea while their clothes drip dry. So this is Frog's story. "When I was small, not much bigger than a pollywog," said Frog, "my father said to me, 'Son, this is a cold gray day, but spring is just around the corner.'" And that's a picture of the big Daddy Frog and Frog when he was a little boy frog. I wanted spring to come. I went out to find that corner. I walked down a path in the woods until I came to a corner. I went around the corner to see if spring was on the other side. Do you think spring is around that corner? "And was it?" asked Toad. "No," said Frog. "It was only a pine tree, 3 pebbles, and some dry grass. They're having more tea, and there's the pine tree, the pebbles, and the grass. I walked in the meadow. Soon I came to another corner. I went around the corner to see if spring was there." "Did you find it?" asked Toad. "No," said Frog. "There was only an old worm asleep on a tree stump." I walked along the river until I came to another corner. I went around the corner to look for spring. "Was it there?" said Toad. "No," said Frog. "There was only some wet mud and a lizard who was chasing his tail." "You must have been tired," said Toad. "I was tired," said Frog, "and it started to rain." Oh no, poor Frog. Looks very sad in the rain. "I went back home. When I got there," said Frog, "I found another corner. It was the corner of my house." "Did you go around it?" asked Toad. "I went around that corner too," said Frog. "What did you see?" asked Toad. There he is, peeking around the corner of his house. What do you think he saw? "I saw the sun coming out," said Frog. "I saw the birds sitting and singing in the tree. I saw my mother and father working in their garden. I saw flowers in the garden. You found it, cried Toad. Yes, said Frog. I was very happy I had found the corner. That spring was just around. Look, Frog, said Toad. You were right. The rain has stopped. Frog and Toad hurried outside. They ran to the corner of Frog's house to make sure that spring had come again. Well, we can't go outside of our house today and look around the corner and see that spring is here. But spring is just around the corner, in the sense that if we wait just a little bit longer, it will come. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we're waiting for the end of that as well. And a vaccine is here, and some people are getting it, but a lot of people still have a lot of time to wait as well. So the end of the pandemic is around the corner too, but we still have to wait. But we'll be waiting together and keeping each other company here online and safely in our homes until we go around the corner to see spring and to see the end of the pandemic. Every week, we as individuals experience many joys and many sorrows. Every week, we as a community come together and share those joys and sorrows with one another so that our joys may be magnified and our sorrows made easier to bear. In just a few moments, you'll have an opportunity to speak your joys and sorrows in the chat. Please keep in mind that this is a public platform and you may not wish to share very private information. If there is something on your heart that you would like support with that is too tender to share in the chat in words, please just type I as if you're raising two fingers in church to have a candle lit for you silently, and we will all hold you in our hearts. I'll lead into our time of Candles of Community together by these words from W.E.B. Du Bois. The prayer of our souls is a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or single thought, but the deed on deed and thought on thought, until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living. Please share your joys and sorrows in the chat now. In 2005, psychologist Cliff Arnold developed a formula by which he determined that the third Monday in January is, quote, the most depressing day of the year. His formula included such factors as weather, time since Christmas, debt level, and time since failing our New Year's resolutions. Since then, the science of this formula has been largely discredited. Nevertheless, our personal experience confirms a basic truth. Winter is depressing. The longer it goes on, the more depressing it becomes. Pseudoscientific formulas aside, hard medical science recognizes a condition called seasonal affective disorder, a form of depression that is thought to be related to the lack of daylight in the winter months. This disorder affects approximately 10 million Americans, with another 10 to 20% experiencing it in a mild form. Whatever the cause of our distress, winter is hard. By the end of January, we are ready for it to be over, but we suspect we have a good deal more to come. As I mentioned at the outset of this service, and as Julia mentioned 2 weeks ago, Groundhog Day has its roots in the Celtic pagan traditions of ancient Europe. At this time of the year, when we are so aware of the season's physical and mental impact, I am reminded about what I love about earth-based pagan religions. They take our experience of nature, validate the emotional experiences that accompany it, and provide an antidote. Pagan spirituality provides myths and rituals which elevate our experience of nature to the level of symbol, and these symbols reflect our lives even outside the season of the observance. Thus, our personal stories are made larger, more noble, more significant, and more connected to that which is beyond us. American culture is very pagan at Christmas. The early Christians absorbed many traditions of Yule, the winter solstice, into the Christmas holiday. In the dark time of year, we hang strings of twinkle lights. As most of nature turns dead and brown, we bring an evergreen tree indoors. In the cold, we host parties for friends and loved ones to generate the warmth of togetherness. But what about when Yuletide is over? We take down our Christmas trees and twinkle lights, say goodbye to visiting guests, and go back to the daily grind, facing only the long winter ahead. By the end of January, our pagan instincts tell us again that we need replenishment deep in our souls. I assert that Americans subconsciously feel the need for a pagan observance at this time of year, so we have clumsily created a holiday to attempt to meet this need. It's called Super Bowl Sunday. Year after year, the Super Bowl broadcast garners ratings surpassing those of any other TV event. Many who don't even follow football become fans for this one day, and many who dislike football watch the game for the star-studded halftime performance and, of course, the ads. I contend that Americans throw Super Bowl parties because we feel the need to congregate, to celebrate, to meet our instinctual pagan drive for the antidote to the season. The problem is that Super Bowl Sunday feels us leaving flat. How could it be otherwise with an observance that revolves around overeating, overdrinking, superstar worship, and commercialism? Not to mention it leaves half the fans in the country feeling defeated by the outcome of the game. Sports fans, please don't get me wrong. I do not mean to diss the Super Bowl. It culminates the football season with a contest between the best two teams in the league. Like the World Series, the NBA championships, and the Stanley Cup, it epitomizes the drama and glory of elite sports competition. The problem is that it's a poor substitute for a true pagan holiday when it comes to the human psyche. The beauty of the Celtic pagan calendar is that it divides the wheel of the year into 8 equal segments, so that just as the psychological effect of one feast is wearing off, we have another. If we look at the Celtic calendar, we notice that, voila, we have a holiday on February 1st. It was known as Imbolc, or after the Christianization of the pagan year, Candlemas, or the Feast of St. Bridget. Cast your imagination back to the world of pre-Christian Europe, when the struggle with winter was acutely physical. With the community relying on the dwindling stores of food put away after the last harvest, starvation was a real possibility. People would have monitored their surroundings daily, eagerly anticipating any sign that spring was in sight. As Julia explained to us recently, the Celtic word Imbolc refers to the pregnancy of sheep at this time of year, one of the earliest signs of new life. Imbolc's mythology revolved around the worship of the goddess Bridget. Bridget was a fire deity and perhaps a sun goddess, which makes sense for a holiday that celebrates the return of life. While Yule represents the literal beginning of the lengthening of days, in late winter we notice and feel the days are actually getting longer. Bridget was also a fertility goddess, the patroness of domestic animals and crops and midwifery, a symbol of new life. Additionally, Bridget was a warrior and a teacher of the martial arts, an acknowledgement that the struggle to break through to the end of winter into spring is not an easy one, but rather one filled with strife and danger. The combinations of her aspect of fertility goddess and warrior reflect the labor of childbirth, especially as it was in the days before modern medicine, a pushing through the pain in a fight for the life of both mother and child. With Christianity, Imbolc became Candlemas, commemorating the ritual purification of Jesus' mother Mary at the temple after the birth of her son, thus keeping the theme of maternity in the holiday. The observance also retained the theme of light. On this day, congregants processed around the church carrying lighted candles to be blessed by the priest and then taken home for the protection of the household. The goddess Bridget became Saint Bridget, who by legend was the abbess of Kildare in the late 5th and early 6th century Ireland. The tales of Saint Bridget portray her as a decidedly feisty woman, a proto-feminist, if you will, thus keeping the energy of the fierce mother warrior goddess alive. Observances of Imbolc or Candlemas included the cleaning and blessing of the home and hearth and the kindling of new fire, sometimes using the leftover and dried out Yule greens. Imbolc folk traditions also included weather prediction rituals. Some of these related to the appearance of sun or clouds on Candlemas. Across northern Europe, this divination of winter's end involved sightings of wildlife emerging from hibernation. The Germans watched for the appearance of the badger and tied their prediction of the weather to the seeing of his shadow. The Pennsylvania Dutch brought this tradition to North America. Finding no badgers native to Pennsylvania, they chose the next best mammal they could find, the groundhog. We all know the legend. If the groundhog sees his shadow on February 2nd, there will be 6 more weeks of winter. What I always found puzzling about Groundhog Day, however, is that the legend doesn't tell us how much more winter we're in for if he doesn't see it. Obviously, winter is not going to end February 3rd, so if he doesn't see his shadow, we're stuck with anything less than 6 weeks. Up to 5 weeks and 6 days? Then I counted the weeks. 6 weeks from Groundhog Day places us in mid-March, the time that in this climate it usually starts to feel spring-like. 7 weeks from today places us at the vernal equinox or the first day of spring. Groundhog Day, in fact, has very little to do with whether Punxsutawney Phil sees his shadow. The purpose of Groundhog Day, or Imbolc, or Candlemas, is to celebrate that regardless of sun or clouds on the day, in approximately 40 days winter will be over. Groundhog Day's motto, then, is winter will end. Or in the words of Frog and Toad, spring is just around the corner. In previous iterations of this sermon that I have preached in past years at this and other UU churches, I have at this point in the manuscript observed that in the modern world, winter is, for most of us, no longer a matter of physical survival, and I have made the leap from the physical to the metaphorical. But the COVID-19 pandemic has made the struggle for literal survival acutely real for us again. As of the date of the rewrite of this sermon, 462,000 people in the United States have lost their lives to COVID. While the deadly spike in cases locally and nationally that we saw heading into the winter in November 2020 has subsided, this literal winter of COVID is not over. But I do not wish to rule out the metaphorical either. The genius of pagan observances is that they tap into archetypes that are universal. In these archetypes, our personal psychological experiences find a mirror and a message. In fact, the metaphoric significance of the archetypes goes beyond the personal to encompass the collective struggles we face in society. And think of the struggles we have had to endure these past few years in this country. A presidential administration in which the inherent worth and dignity of human beings was perpetually under attack, especially if those human beings were immigrants, or refugees, or Muslim, or brown, or black, or LGBT, or female, or disabled. A federal government that followed not the guidance of fact or reason or policy, but chaotically roller coastered to the whims of one man's ego. A party line that claimed to hold law and order above all else, but in the end fomented an insurrection that attacked our Congress in the process of carrying out the peaceful transition of power that was supposed to be guaranteed by our Constitution. We, as a nation, are traumatized and weary. The psychological message of Groundhog Day, or Imbolc, or Candlemas, is one of endurance and of hope. I grew up in a track and cross-country family, so when I hear the word endurance, I automatically think of long-distance running. All long-distance runners know the unique satisfaction of completing a particularly challenging workout or race. No matter how hard it was to push through to your goal, you are left with the knowledge, I have done it. I can endure. If I can endure this, what else do I have the strength to face? I most recently preached this sermon in late January 2017 at the Unitarian Universalist Community Church in Park Forest. Inauguration Day had just passed, and many among the congregants, including myself, had just attended the first Women's March. Collectively, all gathered were afraid of what the next 4 years would hold. What violence would be perpetrated upon the most vulnerable in our society and upon our democracy as a whole? We had rallied to the cry of resist, but we would have to sustain this resistance for a full 4 years. And what toll would that take on us mentally, physically, and spiritually? I could feel that the Groundhog's message of endurance and hope was resonating with the congregation, and when I stepped down from the pulpit and it was time for a musical interlude, the pianist, impromptu, launched into Gonna Fly Now, the theme song from the movie Rocky. It was the perfect release of tension into levity and the perfect underscore to the message that we are going to make it together, although we had no idea how. I am preaching this sermon in the t-shirt from the virtual 5K I ran this Groundhog Day. Well, I didn't run it virtually, I actually ran it, but I recorded my results virtually on a website, along with participants from different parts of the country. With the image of the groundhog, it proclaims the one-word message, perseverance. When I saw this race advertised online, I knew I had to run it because I knew the race organizers had grasped the true meaning of Groundhog Day. When I got my race packet in the mail, I thought it was very telling that every single participant was given the bib number 2021. Because what is Groundhog Day 2021 but the ultimate Groundhog Day of all Groundhog Days? Just as the groundhog's emergence from its den proclaims that there are only 6 more weeks of winter at most, at this moment we have real reason to hope the end of the COVID-19 pandemic is in sight. There has been a sustained downward trend in cases. Vaccines are available, although they are still not being distributed as quickly as we would like. Dr. Anthony Fauci has predicted that by late summer or early fall, the percentage of the population vaccinated may reach the point that we can, quote, get back to some form of normality, maybe quite normal, end quote. And little by little, executive order by executive order, baby step by baby step, we see the chaos and cruelty of the previous presidential administration replaced by even-handedness, reliance on facts and reason, human decency, and the respect for human dignity. Our nation's problems are still all around us, and we are still starkly aware of them. But we have a reason to stop, take a breath, regroup, and dig in for the long haul out of darkness into light. I feel compelled to stress an important caveat when touting the value of endurance. Throughout history, some religious leaders have mistakenly glorified the endurance of the oppressed. Battered women have been counseled to endure their abuse. Slaves have been exhorted to endure their bondage. The poor have been praised for enduring subsistence just this side of starvation. But without hope for change, To simply endure hardship leads to debilitating depression, numbness, and despair. And I don't think we are necessarily talking about someone else when we are talking about that state of hopelessness. I think that some, maybe a good number among us, have known that abject hopelessness at one point or another during the COVID-19 pandemic or during the period of social and political sickness we have just lived through. For the winter of endurance to have meaning, it must be accompanied by the empowerment to believe in and reach for the spring of real change. This kind of endurance with hope is best illustrated by the life of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in a South African prison for his activism against apartheid. In his autobiography, Mandela wrote, "I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nature or nurture, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed toward the sun, one's feet moving forward. There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death." Optimism is not the same as naivete or self-delusion. Hope is only true if it is realistic. But I don't think I need to belabor this point in this sermon this time around. I don't think any of us is hoping for a magical or Pollyannish solution to the myriad complicated problems of the pandemic or our continued political division. For hope to be realistic, it must also be accompanied by the awareness that change is often gradual. Remember, Imbolc celebrates the pregnancy of the ewes, not the birth of the lambs. Hope can come from new insights conceived that may take months or years to come to fruition. Furthermore, Imbolc reminds us that hope comes from the recognition of small changes. A pile of snow that melts just a little every day. The days lengthening by 1 minute every 24 hours. A 40-degree breeze. A modest mammal emerging from hibernation. A few thousand more Americans vaccinated. Another day in which our government functions to work toward the good of our nation's citizens instead of against it. The acknowledgement of gradual change in small steps can be immensely helpful in facing our personal struggles and our societal challenges. Another condition for successful endurance is balance. Sometimes we cope with hard times by going forth and taking risks, striving to endure against all odds. But other times we cope by drawing back for rest and recuperation. Both are psychologically necessary, and in balance they serve us well. Just as hibernation is necessary for some animals to survive the winter, rest periods give us time to rekindle our hope and muster our strength to go forth and reach for what is better. Just as seeds or bulbs planted in the ground germinate under frozen soil and get ready to sprout, humans too need times of inactivity to let what is new germinate within, so that external change can happen at a later time. Our hope is in the belly of the ewe, in the knowledge that change is gradual. Our hope is in the back and forth rhythm of rest and recuperation and bold going forth. Our hope is in the metaphor of the cycles of the seasons. Social change also occurs in cycles. Winter is followed by spring, yet there comes another winter which is followed by spring again. Our hope is being part of a larger community, in the solidarity we feel with like-minded souls, in the promise we see in the kindness and compassion we observe each other extending to friend and stranger on a daily basis. Our hope is in the small signs, the small victories that give us sustenance to persevere. My closing words for you today are a reading from the book of essays, Small Victories, by one of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott. In this excerpt from this essay, she recounts her participation in a protest march during one of our previous social winters the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003. I close with these words because I believe they sum up well the hope we find in one another to carry on. Two things carried the day: regular people saying no to power and glorious camaraderie. We were sad and afraid, but we had done the most radical thing of all. We had shown up, not knowing what else to do, and without much hope. The barricades were broken down for once, between races, colors, ages, sexes, classes, nations. At first, it feels like us versus them, and then you're shoulder to shoulder with tens of thousands of people, reading one another's signs, signs that pierce you or make you laugh out loud. You rub shoulders, smell the bodies and the babies and pot and urine and incense and fear, and everyone streaming past, including you. For once, you are a part of the stream, and in being part of it, you smell the pungent green shoots of hope. The feeling may be only for the moment, but it's a quantum moment. It might happen again, and spread and spread and spread, and for a moment and then another, there's no judgment, no figuring out, just an ebullient trudge, step, step, step. Wow. That's the prayer I said the morning after the Peace March. Wow. I felt buoyed by all those people walking slowly together down Market Street. Then amazingly, only a few days later, the very first bulbs began to bloom. Within a week, there were dozens of daffodils in the yard. When this finally happens in late winter every year, I'm astonished. I've always given up. In November and December, when I plant them, I get swept up in the fantasy that planting bulbs sounds like a romantic and fun thing to do. But it never is. The earth is rocky and full of roots. Yet you dig holes for ugly, shriveled bulbs, throw in some poppy seeds, and cover everything over, and you know you'll never see them again. It's death and clay and shrivel. December and January have been so grim the past few years. Yet here we are in February, with war drums and daffodils everywhere, and poppies waiting in the wings. Let us say these words for extinguishing the chalice together in unison. Let us go in peace, believe in peace, and create peace in our lives and in the world. Amen.